Hey, everybody. It's Tim Niederreiter, an author of the Spells of the Curtain series, is currently available. Oh, by the way, this I'm not going to plug right away. Bad YouTuber. But I'm an author, a podcaster, and I'm trying my hand at some YouTube streaming right now. And this is going to be the first in what I've been calling a moment of fiction. I came up with this idea 10 minutes ago, and I'm sure you'll be able to tell because the quality of this video will not be super high. But that's just life. So I'm Tim, and I'm talking about this book, A Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin. So in A Clash of Kings, this is the second book of the Song of Ice and Fire series, widely popularized, the second season of the TV series, the Game of Thrones. So it's I think it might be strange for me to start with this because I don't allow me to explain why. This is the first one because I plan on deconstructing a single scene or chapter of each story I take a look at here. And honestly, this one didn't come to mind first. It came to mind second. The first one is one I want to spend a little more time on getting ready for because it is just plain something I love more. But I do love the prologue of A Clash of Kings. And strangely, there's only two sections of the series that I've actually read, and that's the part that makes it strange because I've only read the first 100 or so pages of Game of Thrones, the first book, and this prologue of book 2, and I've read no other parts of the series. But as a standalone piece of the story, book 2's prologue works very well, and as a writer, it does some things I'm really fond of. As a reader, it really made me feel something. So for those not familiar, this is the scene. I mean, it was in the TV series, but it was not done as well in the TV series, I think, as in the book. And some people will say, well, duh, that a TV show is always going to massacre a book as far as what they do to the source material. However, I think it's not necessarily true. I know there's some parts of the TV show I liked a lot more than parts of the book. I was able to watch the whole TV series up to this point, and with varying levels of enjoyment, and I couldn't get through the books. So let that be a lesson to people about how the variety and there's a different level of a different level of investment you get into a TV series, and they have different things work better for me in the TV series. Anyway, so the prologue of this book of A Clash of Kings takes place shortly I don't actually know when it takes place. I guess I've never finished book one, but I assume it takes place just after the end of book 1 or toward the end of book 1. And just like most of I think all the prologue characters of Game of Thrones of the Song of Ice and Fire series, the prologue perspective character does not survive the scene or the chapter. And this is our hero for this kind of vignette is Maester Cresson, who is Stannis's one of the possible kings of Westeros. I'm sure anyone watching this will probably know that. But he's King Stannis's maester, and he more or less raised Stannis. He's so old, presumably he's much older than Stannis. And I only reviewed the book briefly before this, but this is because it stuck with me. And not presumably, he is definitely much older than Stannis, because he remembers when Stannis and his brothers were children, and how. And on page 11, especially of this paperback version, there's one of my favorite lines. So let me get there and show you and demonstrate one of the things that, as Cresson looks at, he's thinking about, God damn it, he's thinking about Stannis's brother Renly. And when they were children, and he thinks about and he's thinking about how much he cares for Renly, and how he cared for Renly back then, and no one else really cared for him the same way. But mostly he's focused on Stannis. Actually, I think this excerpt is more he's focused on how Stannis had been always brushed aside. That's basically the gist of his. Stannis was always the brother who nobody loved, basically, except for Cresson, because Cresson really cared for this kid, but until he becomes a merciless ruler, and up to that point even, because that's one of the reasons Crescent ends up dying, is he ends up being poisoned because Stannis' new advisor, Melisandre, wants to get rid of him. Anyway, so that's basically the summary. But and Crescent being he's a religious figure, but he's also a teacher, and that's kind of that's one of the reasons I think it's such a good human scene. This prologue, these first 29 pages or so, because from the moment we meet Crescent, he's basically carrying. I wish I should have studied more. I'll do that next time. I'll pay more attention next time, and you see what I mean, because I'm not remembering a lot of specifics, and I just want to kind of keep things going here. So, yeah. So next time I'll quotes. I swear. Next time I'll care enough to have quotes. But I still really like this scene. Granted, not my favorite books in the world. So, so the thing I really like about this scene, of course, is the approach. There's this character who we really get in depth with him for 20 pages, and he's introducing us to another character who's going to be more important through the series. I think that's really clever. I think it's really cool because Stannis is a very important character in this series, as opposed to, obviously, Crescent is basically not does not carry on, but you can kind of see the influence. And granted, he doesn't even have that much influence on Stannis. He's powerless because this man who he raised doesn't want to listen to him anymore. And it's a really sad scene, obviously. I mean, it's one of those scenes that could make you tear up right at the beginning of a book. So that's kind of a downer if you want something. But it tells you right away what kind of book you're in. That's the other thing. Even though you probably already read book 1 if you're reading this, unlike me, it tells you this is the kind of series this will be. People we care about are going to die, for one thing, because Crescent dies at the end of the scene. And we do care about him. At least I did by the end of the scene. And then, but also, people aren't going to be, the relationship isn't reciprocal, because Crescent really does care for Stannis. Stannis doesn't care about Crescent at all. And that's the impression I get. He's this ungrateful kind of character, which is interesting because he is all about his honor and stuff. That's what he purports. But you see when the chips are down, he doesn't care. He's going to go after new allies and a new faith rather than stick with his old maester who actually raised him and loves him. So there's this weird, an analogy. I could get too deep into it. I was an English major. I could get too deep into this if I want with, he's chasing this affair basically, and he's given up on, and he has to throw away his parents, more or less, his parent Crescent. He has to destroy him to become his own man. But that's, I don't think that's actually what this scene's about. I think that's kind of a semi-obvious reading, but it's also, I think it's sort of wrong, even though he is throwing aside Crescent. That's true. But he's not doing it because he needs to become the ruler. He does it because he doesn't trust that he can do it. He doesn't. It's not because he's become powerful enough that he doesn't need him anymore. And that's really the tragedy here, because he could really use a guy like Crescent, I think, backing him up, advising him, but he doesn't want it, and he's too arrogant to acknowledge that, basically. And this is his downfall in the end, indeed, is he trusts the wrong people. So anyway, that's basically this scene. That's more what I thought about it, and it was truly a moment in fiction. So these will probably be pretty short videos, so I'm gonna let it go here and see you around. I don't know when I'll be doing one of these again. We'll see if it gets any response. Obviously, you can find my podcasts elsewhere. I do 2 podcasts. One releases on Wednesday, so right tomorrow there'll be a new one with my co-host Rob Ward. It's Of Mooks and Monsters. That one's about role-playing games. And then on every Sunday, I release an episode of Alive After Reading, which is my author conversation show. And yeah, so that's more or less where we're at. Oh, yes. Also, don't forget, my website is mentalsellerpublications.com. That's seller with a C. I'll put the link in the show notes eventually, but not this time because I forgot. And then you can find my books on Amazon.com. Spells of the Curtain. It's fantasy. It's not like Game of Thrones, because you may have gathered I don't have a great opinion of this series overall. I do enjoy it. I think George R.R. Martin did a good job. It's not my kind of story. So, yeah. Thanks for watching, and see you later.